welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. We have here a very special guest with us right now, Eli Ben-Sasson, who is co-founder and CEO of StarkWare. So Eli's been in the cryptography space for over 20 years, a true veteran of the space, and co-invented the major protocols that many of you in the audience are very familiar with, like Starks, Fry, Zcash, to name a few. Eli, what an honor it is to have you here today. Very much looking forward to hearing about your vision and philosophies of the ZK space, zkSTARKs, and some more details of what you and the StarkWare team are currently focusing on. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ming, for having me here. Thanks all the audience, and really great to be here. Looking forward to answering some questions.
Yeah, definitely. I'm wondering, Eli, if we can first start off with your why for being in this space. Very curious to know what first got you interested in cryptography in general, and what made you stay after all these years?
What got me in was initially curiosity, but then I had this eureka moment at a Bitcoin conference happened 11 and a half years ago, in which I was probably the first to realize that a bunch of technologies, or actually kind of deep math, is highly relevant, not just to privacy, but also to scaling of blockchains. And it just struck me. And I was doing research on that particular class of technologies, which ended up being Starks, before and after. So it just, destiny maybe? Really, it was just this realization that what I've been doing has found relevance to something that is very interesting and I didn't know enough about at the time, which is blockchains.
Yeah, definitely. Just love how you also mentioned that, for ZK specifically, we're not just focusing on the privacy aspect, but also the scaling aspect as well. I'm wondering if we can also talk a little bit about integrity webs. So you, as well as the StarkWare team, often describe StarkNet as the next step in the evolution of integrity webs following other ecosystems like Bitcoin or Ethereum. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more on how StarkNet builds upon the progression of these integrity webs. And maybe you could also mention some challenges in these integrity webs that Ethereum and Bitcoin cannot solve on their own, but something that StarkNet is aiming to address.
Yeah, so what is the integrity web? First of all, at a very maybe even emotional or conceptual level, think of it as something that sits on top of the World Wide Web. So what is the World Wide Web? We're so dependent on it. It's a collection of protocols that, and then a peer-to-peer network that gives us something of immense value. What is that thing? That thing is information and the ability to communicate, right? This is how almost all of the information we consume today and all of our communication goes through the World Wide Web, right? Okay. Now, on top of that, imagine a new layer that what it delivers is a very high level of integrity, meaning that you know that the right thing is being done, even when you're not watching, on a very fundamental level. So now, even when there are all kinds of incentives and you worry will my money stay with me? Will it be taken without my consent? Will my reputation be tarnished in a way that I have no control over? So imagine something that is like the World Wide Web, but assures you of its integrity, which means, no, your reputation cannot be tarnished out of nowhere. Your funds cannot be taken, stuff cannot just be made up. Things cannot just disappear or emerge. And So this like very high level of integrity, again, but like with a peer-to-peer protocol. So that is like the integrity web. Now we already have parts of it, or the initial building blocks, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they solve the problem of integrity by adhering to three very important principles. One is openness and broadness, which means everyone is invited to be an operator of the world of this integrity web. The second thing is incentivized integrity, which means that the reason you can trust this is because the protocol defines a redistribution of value in a way that incentivizes integrity. And the third principle is public verifiability. On your smartphone or on a small computer, you can check on commonly available means that everything that relates to you has been done with integrity. Now, it is this last part in which zkSTARK technology is very well suited to help, because we can sort of exponentially boost the capacity of the integrity web while maintaining public verifiability using the integrity of math. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah, no worries. I really like that first, the kind of macro overview that you gave. Like for integrity webs, what we want is like our World Wide Web, but instead where our integrity is ensured and where users can gain back control, where value is redistributed. And I really like how you broke that down into three main principles that we currently see in our integrity webs, like with openness and broadness, with incentivized integrity, public verifiability. So really like that kind of overview and the vision that you see specifically with restructuring our webs. So really appreciate that.
Thank you, Ali.
Yeah, of course. And Ali, just being in the ZK space for so many years, I'm wondering, how have you seen the space evolve over time? How would you compare the space when you first started to now? Were there any kind of key challenges in the past that have since been addressed, or like what kind of new challenges are we prioritizing now? Or any kind of aspects that you foresee becoming challenges in the future, especially as adoption increases? Just very curious to see or to hear about your perspective on the evolution of the space.
So first of all, on a very personal level, I'm happy to see that things that I was talking about, even 10 years ago, and believed in, even 15 years ago, before blockchains, which is that the math that underlies cryptographic proofs can help somewhere in the world, is now like widely adopted. Everyone, like everything is ZK. ZK is the end game. More so, the very specific set of technologies that my co-authors, my students, my collaborators, and I have been pushing forward, and folks were laughing about, ridiculing, saying this won't work, it's not good enough, it doesn't scale, is now the standard. And I'm talking, of course, about hash-based, zkSTARKs. There's a bunch of technologies, and they keep evolving. But the basic premise of using, small fields, hash-based, post-quantum secure cryptography, not things that are based on number theoretic constructions, which are not as safe, require often trusted setups, and are just much less efficient. So I'm very happy to see that thing, check on that. There's a huge set of challenges with UX and privacy still. So, right, everyone talks about ZK, and I think if you're in the space, that it's ZK, but not really ZK. For instance, almost all of the ZK protocols out there, there are a few outliers like Aztec, for instance. They don't have zero knowledge, and they're not aiming at privacy, which is what zero knowledge is about. They're actually solving scalability. I often, it's a battle I sort of lost, right? I would prefer everyone to talk about these things as validity proofs and validity rollups. not to talk about the ZK. Now, if you ask yourself, why is it that we don't really have very good privacy out there at the fingertips of users? It's not because it's hard or harder to build a zkSTARK than a Stark, or a zkSNARK than a Snark. It is because of the UX aspect, and it gets very cumbersome. So that's a challenge that still remains for the future. And then finally, I think one other challenge that we're seeing a little bit of movement with things like, of course, our own Cairo VM led the way, but you have Maiden and Valida and a bunch of other new VMs, is what is again often called the ZK VM. I don't like the ZK in there because it's not about the zero knowledge, but I'll go with that terminology, which is we need virtual machines that are take into account the fact that you're going to generate proofs of validity for them. So that's something that we're in the process of turning, of having everyone realize that that's the right way to use ZK, rather than take an existing VM, even if it's something as beautiful as the EVM, and trying to slap proofs on it, that it's just not going to be as efficient. So I mentioned three things. One is everyone agrees that hash-based, small field Starks are the best way to go. I'm very happy that we managed to convince the world, or actually the math convinced the world, right? You can't argue with math. Privacy is a problem, like getting it to end users in a way that has good UX. And one thing that is changing, and I'm very optimistic about, is like new models and new VMs that will bring you more scalability and safety.
Yeah, definitely. And really like how you mentioned that it's not just about it being hard to develop a zkSNARK or zkSTARK, but rather kind of one of the main root challenges that we see are relating to UX and privacy, and something that I think a lot of projects in the space are really focused on. But yeah, thank you so much, Eli, for that. And I'm wondering now if we could dive into some of the design considerations and also motivations behind some of the protocols that you helped develop, like with Starks and Fry. And you mentioned briefly earlier on about some of the benefits that come with Starks. But I'm wondering, when you were first working on its original idea, what were some of the factors that you wanted to prioritize in its implementation? And maybe you could also talk about some main considerations in its design.
So in the original protocol, first of all, it was clear to us that we'll go with Starks, mostly for the scalability and no trusted setup and the vastest security, but also the efficiency. So, and it did play out in this way, because like with one single smart contract, we could ever, increase the scale of the computations, no need for any, ceremonies or trusted setups. And so that was one thing, like being able to deliver truly great scale, the greatest that we could at the time. Another consideration, which led us in our initial setting to use actually a rather very large prime, the Stone in our first Stark prover, which was the first, production grade commercial Stark-based system. It's based on the Stone prover. It's open source. A bunch of people are using it already. It is working over a prime field that is 252 bits long. And I was just saying about how much I'm happy that everyone is now, including us, are moving towards the small fields. The reasons we did this was because we realized the largest cost is the cost of verification on layer 1 Ethereum, and layer 1 Ethereum prices today 256-bit operations the same way they price smaller operations, which I hope changes in the future. But so that's reason number one. And then we also, it is a bit simpler to get certain kinds of cryptographic instructions, like elliptic curve digital signatures, if you go with a large prime. So it was like speed of development, and the fact that our main cost was denominated in very large integers. So we went for that. That was another design, speed to reach an actual product deployed in the fastest possible way, in a way that is efficient, given the main constraints, which were L1 cost. And then we wanted something, which is the way, Cairo evolved. We wanted something that both scales and also has extreme efficiency, which led to this very minimalistic VM that is basically captured by something like 30 or so polynomial constraints. It's a very small number, and yet is Turing complete and highly efficient. So efficiency, getting true scale, reaching production as quickly as possible, and looking at the actual costs that end users are going to pay and having those as our factors.
Definitely. So scalability, costs, and then also focusing specifically on Starks not having that kind of trusted setup, and also that efficiency. Got it. Okay, and just on that topic, I'm wondering if you could also talk a bit about how Starks compare to some of the other cryptographic proof systems that currently exist in the market, like Blanc, for example, Groth16, bulletproofs. For those in the audience who aren't too familiar with those other proof systems, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the advantages, but then also the trade-offs that projects nowadays utilizing these proof systems need to consider, like in comparison to Starks.
Yeah, so first of all, I something like 3 or 4 years ago, actually wrote a blog about this, and I'll share with you so you can share with your listeners the link. It's obviously outdated today, but still some things hold to this day. It was called The Cambrian Explosion of Cryptographic Proofs. And then I also did a Stark at Home about it. I'll send you some links, and you can, Alice, please share them with the listeners. Okay. All of these proof systems, there are some things that they share together, and that is arithmetization. So it's a big word, but what does it mean? You want to prove things about computation. Whatever, I went from state A to state B, I processed 1 million payments, and I did so with integrity. This is all about computation, right? A program written in Python or Rust or C. Arithmetization means that you take this program and this problem about, was there integrity? Were all steps carried out correctly? And you convert it to a very mathy kind of problem that involves polynomials, these formulas usually over a finite field. Okay, so this is a very strange and very brilliant mathematical reduction from one domain to the other, from the domain of computation to the domain of math and algebra. And it was first, envisioned in an amazing paper from 1992. It's usually called the LFKN paper, Lund, Fortnow, Karloff, and Nissan. So Professor Noam Nissan actually, is now a celebrated microeconomist working at StarkWare part-time, helping us with tokenomics and microeconomics. But back in the day when he was much younger, he also was one of those co-authors who invented arithmetization. Okay, so all of the snarks, bulletproofs, Planck, you name it, all of them have arithmetization. Okay, so where do things become a bit different? There are things that use number theoretic assumptions, and they could be broken by quantum computers. Often they require a trusted setup. They sometimes lead to much shorter proof lengths, less than a kilobyte or less than 10 kilobytes, because they sort of assume, more. They assume a lot of assumptions about how hard it is to factor large integers, okay? And Planck's and bulletproofs and Groth16 snarks and a bunch of other things are of that sort. So their main advantage is very short proof size, sometimes less than half a kilobyte, but often not always require trusted setup, don't scale very well, very long time to compute, and will be broken by quantum computers, which is more and more of a concern these days. Starks, or these hash-based systems, they do not need to assume that factoring is hard. The only thing they need to assume is the existence of a collision-resistant hash function. And they lead to much greater scale, don't require a trusted setup, more secure, post-quantum resistant, meaning that they will resist attacks by quantum computers. But the downside, they have much longer proofs. Instead of less than half a kilobyte, the proofs there could be dozens of kilobytes. That's the lay of the land.
Yeah, I got it. So there are quite a few different factors that like different proof systems are prioritizing on, but like these trade-offs are inevitable for kind of any system. So there's like what you mentioned, Ellie, about incorporating quantum resistance, especially within Starks. But then there's also the considerations relating to the size of the proof, cost, scaling. So these are all kind of factors that we all need to consider. So really great for you to make that distinction there. You mentioned a bit about the post-quantum security and just with quantum resistance, which I know that Starks and also Fry incorporates. I'm wondering about your views on the area of post-quantum security. Should we consider quantum threats as an urgent concern or just something to monitor and consider without any active urgency right now?
So the best answer I have is I'm not an expert on on what's going on with quantum computers. It's a fascinating topic. I know very little about it, but I do know folks that know more. So one of the most brilliant researchers and also general audience speakers about it is Scott Aronson, and actually reached out to him and asked him, hey, what's the status of quantum? This was 2 weeks ago. He wrote to me, just 2 days ago I posted a blog post about it, so I can share the link to that as well. I think the rough TLDR there is, so this is Professor Aronson saying, an authority on quantum computing, saying, if a few years ago I would say, don't worry about it, now I'm saying, yes, definitely worry about it, because what I'm hearing is that within the 5-10 year range, this may be an actual thing you need to worry about. So end of quote or semi-quote. So not an expert, but the experts are saying you definitely need to start preparing for a post-quantum resistant construction.
Got it. And just shifting some gears into some of the newer developments in the space that StarkWare helped to develop. Specifically wanted to go into the focus of this interview, which is on zkSTARKs. I'm wondering if, Ellie, you could talk a bit about the motivation behind developing zkSTARKs. And for those in the audience who aren't too familiar, what do zkSTARKs enable that traditional Starks lack? And how do zkSTARKs and traditional Starks differ in terms of their design and performance?
So first of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. The zkSTARK paper is a brilliant math breakthrough by 3 brilliant researchers. Ulrich Habok from Polygon Labs, David Levitt and Shachar Topini from StarkWare. So I'm not a contributor to that paper. So okay, what's going on? Remember, I said that the first commercial Stark. Well, let me go back. The zkSTARK white paper, which I am a co-author of and did it with my students when I was a professor of computer science at Technion, actually implemented a Stark over a binary field, what's called the field of size 2 to the 64. Okay, and I love binary fields. I don't know why, actually. I don't know. Maybe I fool myself that because it's bits and addition is just XORs, it's simpler, but I don't know. So I have some weird love of binary fields. I love them. Okay, but then the first commercial construction used this stone prime, which is a 252-bit prime. And it worked very well. We used it to settle over $1.2 trillion worth of value. And I think most importantly, this was the thing that convinced the world that validity rollups are the end game and that Starks are the way to do it. Okay, this system that we built. And because it was like, reducing costs for users of DYDX and immutable X by 3 to 4 orders of magnitude, like instead of paying $40 for an NFT, paying less than 1/5 of a cent. So, but we knew that it's, has, in terms of like scaling capacity on the proving side, because it uses this very large field, it's not so efficient, because just addition and multiplication of 256-bit integers is pretty slow compared to doing things with 32-bit integers. So we said our next prover, we did sort of internal research at StarkWare. We read all of the relevant research, asked ourselves, should we incorporate some things from number theoretic constructions? Let's review what has been happening since we last looked at it. And we decided that it must be a very small field, one that is 32 bits or less. Okay, so now which one? Well, the Mersenne prime, M31, turns out to be extremely fast because its structure is like very nice for CPUs to operate over. And but there's a problem with the sort of structure. I mean, I don't want to go too much into math here, but there are these things called group, and there are these things called cyclic groups. I'll just say that it's a little bit, it's like one of these fractal things where you take something and within it, you have something that is exactly the same of half the size. And within that, there's another thing of exactly half the size again and again and again and again, like this kind of babushka, this sort of, doll that has within it a smaller doll and a smaller. And if you get this structure, it leads to very high efficiency related to the fast Fourier transform, and Fry also relies on it. Okay, now unfortunately, M31 just doesn't have this babushka kind of, this doll within doll kind of structure. Doesn't have. So this was a problem that we already tackled a few years ago in a joint paper with, so on that one I was a co-author with Dan Carmon, David Levitt, both of them from StarkWare, and Swasti Koparty, who is a professor of math and computer science, an old colleague of mine that is also a scientific consultant to StarkWare. So there, what we showed is that you can, even if the field itself doesn't have this babushka style structure, you can construct on top of it things that will have it, in particular elliptic curves. Okay, so the three brilliant authors of zkSTARK came and said, oh, elliptic curves are not the only kind of thing that you can construct over a finite field. You can also use some other curve, and actually the curve that they use is the circle curve. So that's why it's called zkSTARK. Anyways, I'm pretty sure I must have confused most of the listeners, but I'll just say that zkSTARK allows you to eat your cake and have it too. So you can take the very best field that you can have for a 32-bit world, which doesn't have the needed babushka-like structure, and nevertheless find such a structure, construct it in a very efficient way over that field.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such a very clear, detailed explanation, and really loved also the doll within doll analogy that you made with the fractal comparisons as well. I think you made it super clear to the audience, so really appreciate that, Eli. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit also about what the future that you see with zkSTARKs. Do you see zkSTARKs eventually replacing traditional Starks, or are there scenarios in which they both can coexist, where each is suited for its specific purposes and use cases? What do you see the future of zkSTARKs playing out as?
Okay, here's what I would like to see, but what I would like to see is a way in which you can actually support certainly all Starks, maybe even all, like I'm a bit worried about bringing in things that are not post-quantum secure, but all post-quantum secure hash-based constructions I would love to support them all within one universe. So if we talked about the integrity web, I hope that when the integrity web is fully constructed, you can basically choose your proving method, in particular, which, whether it is a Stark or a Plonky version or a Plonky 3 or one of those, or a GKR based system or whatever, and you can, in particular, which finite field or other thing you do it over. The Stone Prime is certainly going to be with us for a very long time, because there's already a lot of value and a lot of things built on top of it. Certainly you will have zkSTARK M31 stuff joining, and I hope that down the line we will have stuff based on binary fields and other small primes. I do think that in terms of efficiency, probably the small fields, 32 bits and below, those are probably going to be the sweet spot. Maybe someday 64-bit fields, just depending on what hardware supports very efficiently. So I think the sweet range is going to be somewhere between 32 and 64 bits is where most of the proving will be done, just because it's the most efficient.
Got it. And now, since we're kind of nearing the end of our discussion with Eli, I wanted to take some audience questions, and I did see one that I thought was very fun. Eli, I'm wondering, this is an audience question, if you could see a dream project that's implemented using zkSTARKs or zkSTARKs in the next decade, what would it be and why?
If I could see a what?
A dream project. So maybe like an ideal use case or ideal application.
Yeah, the only thing is I'm very certain we'll have exactly that within the next 5 years. I want you to feel that you truly own your life, your assets, your actions, in a way you will first of all feel this, like this is really mine, right? In the digital space, I own it, I control it, no one can take it from me. My reputation, my actions, my assets, my intentions. Now, you won't know that behind the scenes, part of what is supporting this integrity and this true ownership happens to be Starks. You won't know. I mean, I prefer that you don't know. Just like when we all board a plane, what is holding us up in air is a lot of very fancy math, right? We don't know that, right? That there's a whole bunch of FFTs and analysis and whatever it is. Like, we don't know that, but that's what's keeping us in the air in the most efficient way. So the dream thing would be that there will be an all-encompassing integrity web built on top of the World Wide Web. We will all use it. My parents are going to use it for securing their assets and claiming their reputation and intentions, and truly partaking in all kinds of societal and financial activities. Now, they won't know that behind the scenes there's a Stark supporting it. That's fine. So that's my dream, that we all get to truly own our assets in our life, rebalance power from the corporations that basically we're entrusting and custodying all of our information actions with, bring it back to ourselves so that we truly own it. And it cannot be done without what is called ZK, validity proofs. It cannot be done without validity proofs. And the best ones are going to be small field hash-based constructions like zkSTARKs and others.
Yeah, and I really love how kind of like the vision that you and the StarkWare team has really anchors on building this integrity web. And I also really like how you mentioned that of Starks and just ZK in general as a tool for achieving this dream, but it isn't that main focus. The main focus here is bringing power and ownership back to the users. So really like how you also make that distinguishment also as well, Eli. I'm wondering also, how do you see the ZK space evolving over the next few years? What's your long-term vision for the space, and what do you believe, what does your ideal world look like?
I love this question, Alice. I'll say maybe I'm just a very happy and optimist person. I love the space as it is. So I think it's doing exactly the right thing, which was the right thing. There's so much exploration, both on the research side, the research side, the science, so many teams forming, getting funded, exploring things. Okay, so it reminds me of something that I said to my co-founders and team members on day one, and I still believe in it. I said, I have no doubt that our technology is going to be globally adopted because it's the best, it's the right thing, it's going to be there. I'm not sure that we, StarkWare, are going to be the ones monetizing it. But that's fine. Like, often you could be one of the leaders of something and still have that thing adopted without you necessarily monetizing it. But that, we'll try to do that, but maybe it won't play out that way. But the most important thing for all of you and for us is to take the true scarce resource, which is our time and focus, and ask, are we spending it on something that has been worthwhile? And I have no doubt that advancing this vision is going to be one of these things. Even if we don't succeed, economically and financially, you will not look back and say, what a waste of time this was. And I'm very sure of this, as I was of all three of these things, that this will be adopted globally. I'm not sure we will be the ones best suited to monetize it, but I have no doubt that this is the best use of my time and my team's time. And if you guys are entering the space, advancing validity proofs, cryptographic proofs for bringing and building the integrity web is not a waste of your time. It is time well spent. Just don't deviate from the ideals and don't get lured into all kinds of fake it till you make it. And, security or these proofs are going to come sometime soon, but meanwhile, don't do that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think this ties into the last question I'm going to ask, but Eli, what sort of advice would you give to anyone in the audience, so whether it be developers and researchers building in the ZK space and are focused on using Stark-based tech, but then also those, as you mentioned, that may be interested in getting into the ZK space, but currently are not in it, but are still learning more. What sort of general advice or closing thoughts do you have for our audience?
I think the biggest pitfall of teams even right now is that they are fooled to think that we're anywhere close to the end state. Usage of our technology is not even scratching the surface of 0.1% of its potential, which means the only way this will play out is that the set of platforms, or the platform that will really build the edifice of the integrity web, will be one that can truly support, first of all, the three principles of blockchain, which are the openness, decentralization, broadness, incentivized integrity, and public verifiability, and can do so at a global scale. Okay, so build only for that, and build only on top of that, and pick wisely, because as I tweeted yesterday, right, the path of the righteous integrity web is sort of riddled from both sides by all kinds of things that look to you as if they are the end game while they're not. So do your own research, pick something that can truly change the world, and not something that is right now achieving a lot of hype.
Yeah, incredible piece of advice. We always want to optimize for the long term. But yeah, thank you so much, Eli, for being here today and for all your insights on integrity webs, motivations behind developing Starks and zkSTARKs. And also just really love your emphasis on not just focusing on advancing the tech, but also making sure that you uphold your values as well. So really love all the areas that we covered today. And thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you, Alice, for having me here, and thank you for listening in.
Yeah, thank you so much.